course, we don't know what is, what's going to happen. And there are a lot of disparate voices in American elite circles in Washington, in the security state, that have their different points of view. So nothing is settled. But if I had to make a guess, I'd guess that the war in Ukraine is going to end in a short period of time. And I think that Trump's basic view, maybe I'll be proved wrong, but I think Trump's basic view is that he doesn't want a war with Russia, and he doesn't want this ongoing war in Ukraine, and he doesn't want to spend more money on it, and he doesn't want to bother with it. So my feeling is that we're at the end of U.S. finances and arming of Ukraine. And these threats are ridiculous, by the way. Russia doesn't sell anything to the U.S. market, so putting tariffs on Russian goods is the most absurd little blah, blah, blah. It means nothing. So he has no threats. And he probably knows that, and there's a lot of posturing and a lot of bullshit in his normal patter. I think basically he wants to end this war because there's no interest in it. And essentially, look, this was a gamble. This was Brzezinski's gamble. Let's push eastward. Russia can't do anything about it. Russia showed it can do something about it. Biden was an incompetent, in my view. His team was utterly incompetent. They thought that we'll push to Ukraine and Russia can't resist, it won't resist. But if it does resist, we take them out of the SWIFT system, we confiscate their money, and then they'll collapse. Okay, this was a completely wrong evaluation. Then they thought, okay, we'll give them attack and missiles, and we'll give them HIMARS, and then they'll collapse. Or Putin won't be able to mobilize because then there'll be an uprising against him. Look, they were playing poker with no hand, and they're not good at it. I have no respect for the strategic calculations of Antony Blinken or Jake Sullivan. I don't even know whether Biden was of full mind after the beginning of his term, because apparently he really faded mentally pretty early on, and then they tried to hide that for a long time. But my point is, this was a gamble. From an American point of view, why not? Oh, who cares? Spend $150 billion, test some new weapon systems. No Americans dying, or very few. And the senators said, this is best that American money can buy. We're weakening Russia and no Americans dying. So you have to understand, from the American point of view, this was not a big deal. This was a gamble. It went bad. From Russia's point of view, it was existential. They really don't want America on their border. They really don't want Aegis missile systems. They really don't want intermediate range weapon systems of America close to their border. So for Russia, this was a very serious thing. But for America was, I believe, a kind of let's see what happens kind of thing. For Ukraine, it's an unbelievable tragedy. It's a disaster, but the Ukrainians were very naive. And the one that wasn't naive, by the way, was Yanukovych. He said, I got Russia on one side, I got the Americans on the other side, I'll be neutral. And America hates neutral. You believe me. That's even worse than being an enemy, being neutral. And so they had to overthrow the guy. So in this sense, I think Trump doesn't really want to continue this failure. Now, Europeans are running around saying, we'll pick up the war.
And it's insane.
First of all,
to replace the United States.
Impossible.
It's just, yes,
completely,
I know.
Totally, logistically, militarily, financially absurd.
Yeah.
Who's the most absurd in the whole world, by the way? Not the Americans. It's the British. The British are so absurd because they had 150 years as world hegemon and they can't get over it. So Starmer thinks he's Lord Palmerston. He goes over, we give you a 100-year guarantee to the Ukrainians. Worth what? Worth nothing. So there's a lot of BS going on right now. But if you ask me the bottom line of everything, the war is going to end soon. And properly so. And Trump is basically going to say to Putin, okay, no more NATO enlargement. You stop, we stop, and they're going to figure out something.
Yeah.
Considering the perspective that it was all a game, that it was a poker with no hand, all of these things, some people talk about different times during the entire war in the Ukraine when it could have ended, when we could have found diplomacy. One of those points is the March 2022, the negotiations headed, I believe, by Turkey. Was that a serious possibility? Given all of this framework of everything being a game, a strategy, a tendency to build our own power and weaken our enemies, all of that, was this a real moment where we could have had peace, or was this regional power attempting to grow their own power by looking like a peacemaker? What was that moment? And were there other moments that could have been real peace, or were they all sort of these Schaufenster, this window dressing?
I know a lot about that episode and learned a lot about that episode. And at one point, I flew to Ankara to have a very detailed discussion about what was happening. There could have been peace. This was not a game, that was real. What happened was Russia launched its invasion on February 24th. Within days, Zelensky said, okay, we can be neutral. That was the essence of the whole thing. You know, Russia was not even claiming annexation of territory other than Crimea, but not annexation of territory of the Donbass then. All Russia was claiming was the Minsk II agreement, which Germany should have defended but didn't defend. So Zelensky immediately said neutrality. That meant that this was absolutely achievable. Documents were exchanged. I've spoken to very senior diplomats about that. I won't go into exactly all the details, but I've spoken to people who know all about it. And there was very close to an agreement. Then the United States stepped in and said, no neutrality right now. We will give you more arms. You fight on. You can win this thing. That was already in March. The Ukrainians at one moment said to the Turkish mediators, we're not coming back. We're suspending the negotiations. It was just like that. It was one day to the next. And then Boris Johnson came. Boris Johnson is a jerk. And this was obvious then, it's obvious still today, but he amplified this story and told the Ukrainians. And by the way, afterwards, he said in his kind of vulgarity that we must win this because Western hegemony is at stake. So he makes no bones about it, that this is about Western hegemony. Well, cripe. This is about Ukrainians losing 1 million people dead and wounded. And it's a tragedy, and it's a complete abuse of Ukraine. The Ukrainians, I find, very naive in this, or, you know, the ones that weren't naive get overthrown or get taken out of power because the United States will have its way. But what gives me the sense that this is going to come to an end is that finally, with a lousy hand, and you're playing a game and the other side isn't playing a game, you fold. And I think that's what's going to happen.
I agree on this. The aim of the Biden administration was to ruin Russia. Our very intelligent Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock from the Green Party, once said it very openly. publicly that the goal is to ruin Russia and to weaken Russia. And I think maybe about the role of Boris Johnson, I do believe that Boris Johnson was only the emissary of the Biden administration, because they are not going to do on their own something, without the United States. So that's why I do believe that the war in Ukraine was a personal war of Biden himself as well. So he's personally also responsible for this war, like in the war in the Middle East, in the Gaza Strip. And but about the role of Germany, I just want to add something. Because you said Merkel or the Germans, they should have defended the Minsk agreement. Well, if you remember, Merkel, the German chancellor, said publicly, stated later, that the Minsk agreement had served to give Ukraine time to arm itself again. So actually the Germans played a very dubious, very contradictional role here, not a good role, because they betrayed Russians. They betrayed Russia. And François Hollande, the former president of France, he said that's right, that was the aim, to arm Ukraine again, to take some, to win some time, to gain some time, to rearm Ukraine for a conflict, for a confrontation with Russia. And also, if we look back, I mean, the problem started 2008 at the NATO summit in Bucharest, where Germany again played a dubious role, because Merkel on the one hand side with the French president Sarkozy, they stopped the membership action plan of the NATO for Ukraine, like George W. Bush wanted. I mean, he wanted to start the membership action plan for Ukraine and the NATO. They stopped it. But then, on the other hand, they supported the perspective of a NATO membership, and knowing that this is crossing the red line. I mean, that was a red line for Russia. And also the German role at the Maidan coup d'etat in 2014. I mean, the Germans, they didn't care that there are fascists there as actors in this coup d'etat, and they really so the Maidan was actually was driven by the German policy as well. Our now president Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the German president, was 2014 when the Maidan was there. He was in Kiev supporting the coup against Yanukovych. Although they had an agreement with Yanukovych,
Exactly.
I mean,
Then he
to
would stay in
keeping
power.
the constitution, to respect the constitution. And that's why I do believe that the Germans, they take a lot of responsibility for this ongoing war in Ukraine as well, and for all the deaths of the people in Ukraine. And the other thing is, it's fortunate to hear that you do think that Donald Trump is going to end the war in Ukraine, because I think Germany and Europe are the biggest loser of this war. I mean, absolutely, the economy is in a decline in Germany. We have a stagnation in the third year now. We have a lot of closing of many factories. We have a deindustrialization. So it's not just the military aspect, it's the economic aspect as well. So we have a social war, we call it, against the population just because of this war. And but my fear is we are afraid that even if Trump is going to end the war, that the Europeans, especially the Germans, because we are the biggest still, the biggest player in Europe, and the biggest economy still. So we are paying 20%, 25% of the European budget is paid by the Germans. So we have a bilateral money funding Ukraine and the one through the European Union. And we are afraid that we are going to pay the bill. Again, the bill of a US-American proxy war on the European continent after paying the bill regarding the refugees who came from Syria. The refugees came from Afghanistan after 20 years of war of US in Afghanistan. From Yugoslavia, we paid the bill. The refugees came here. And,
these were all American wars of
yes,
choice.
And we are paying already the bill for more than 1 million refugees from the war in Ukraine, and we are going to pay more. And that's why I do think it shows again how important it is to be independent from the US.
We've just hit our time. I know you have a flight
And the
to catch.
vassalage especially, and the vassalage.
I want both of you to have a last comment. I just know we've just hit our time, and I don't want you to miss your flight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to say, if I'm right and it turns out properly that the U.S. has said enough, my God, I hope Europe understands enough. Stop this. And I hope that Europe could rediscover diplomacy. That means going to Moscow or inviting President Putin here to discuss, not going to Kyiv all the time. Kyiv, Kyiv, Kyiv. Yes, we support you forever, but actually talking to the Russians, because the truth is there needs to be peace on this continent. The economic relations of Germany and Russia were mutually beneficial for Europe and for Russia.
Yeah.
These are complementary economies, I can tell you as an economist. They fit together. The U.S. blew up the pipeline, okay? You have an economy that can't function because it was built on a complementary relationship. It should be rebuilt. This absolutely is possible. And let's just hope that somebody figures this out this time, because this has been very costly, absolutely tragic, completely unnecessary, and we have arrived at the time for peace. I'm hoping that in Brussels, President Costa, the president of the European Council, go to Moscow, talk with President Putin. European security is an issue. Have direct discussions. Don't leave it to Trump. Don't leave it to the United States alone, but go for peace, but peace based on diplomacy between Europe and Russia as well.
I think one problem is, Jeffrey, I totally agree on your points. And I'm very, very delighted and would be more delighted if we do have more US Americans like you as really good friends of the Europeans. The thing is, how can we, as you said, my impression is the Americans, they don't care about peace in Europe. They just don't care because it's not their business.
That's right.
They're not interested in. So where are the allies in the United States for us, for Europeans, in aiming to get peace, in having good diplomatic relationships, to end the vassalage relationship to the Americans, between the Americans and the Europeans? Where are the allies for us? How can you help us?
First of all, Europe is a big place, 450 million people. Europe is a rich, wonderful place in the world. Europe is not about to be invaded by President Putin, no matter what stupid people might say. He's not going to. So the idea that Europe, without anyone from the US side, could go ahead and figure out how to have diplomacy, I'm fully confident, by the way. Of course, you have many friends and admirers in the United States, but Europe doesn't need the US to make diplomacy. Europe needs to regain its sense that it is a powerful, important, successful part of the world, I would say with the highest living standards in the entire world, with the best living conditions in the entire world. It should be very proud of what is accomplished here, and it should sit down with President Putin, and you should have a foreign minister that actually talks to Minister Lavrov, doesn't run away, doesn't say, we don't shake hands, we don't sit in the same room. How ridiculous.
She's the antithesis of diplomacy.
Like junior high school,
Yeah,
rather
absolutely.
than like grown-up diplomacy. Because Europe can absolutely do this. And so, I hope the U.S. supports it, but frankly, you don't need the U.S. support to do it. You need Europe to act together in Europe's interest.
Well, I didn't mean really the elites and the U.S. administration or the government, but I do think we do need more voices like yours from the United States.
We'll do the best we can.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate it a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you both. It has been a pleasure hearing you speaking with you. Also, vielen Dank to alle unsere Zuschauer. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. It's been really a very fruitful discussion. Thank you both so much.
Great.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate
Thanks
it.
a
I
lot.
admire so much your leadership.
No, don't exaggerate,
No, I'm
Jeffrey.
not exaggerating.
We are very, very happy to have you, and your voice is very important to us. And I wish we could invite you to the German Parliament to speak to our dumb government on all these colleagues there. So maybe we can. I mean, we are running now the campaign, and on the 23rd we have the elections, and I really do hope that we can organize such a thing.
Well, in the post-election season, let's wish for peace and work on it.
Yeah, really, I really would appreciate it. I mean, who are the allies in the new administration from your perspective?
Well,
I mean, Tulsi and
we're
RFK
waiting
are
to
just
see.
very silent.
Yeah, of course, people still need to be confirmed. We need to understand a lot. I've known Tulsi Gabbard for a long time. I admire her enormously.
Yeah, she's great. I know her.
Yes, and I think she would do and will do a great job as head of national intelligence, and would really change the way things are done. But that means all the deep state forces are out now to try to stop that. But she's strong, and I think she'll make it.
But the State Department run by Marco Rubio, that is really concerning me.
Well, at least he has said in the last couple of days, this war needs to end.
Ukraine.
And we need to go to diplomacy. And so I'm, not naive enough to take the words at face value, but I'm hopeful we're at the start, and maybe he'll be a diplomat. Okay. It's been a while. We didn't have diplomacy for several years.
It's very wishful. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Thank you.